Hello.
Hello.
I am Alex.
I'm Val.
And we're here to start up season 4.
Season 4.
Season 4 of The Sopranos.
Crazy.
I know. So we took a little break at the end of season 3 at the holidays.
Yeah.
And now we're back from the holidays. And we just did a bonus episode. So we kind of recapped season 3, which is something that we're thinking about doing going forward at the end of every season.
I like calling it a bonus episode.
Bonus.
Like lucky you guys.
Yeah.
What a great bonus.
Yeah.
If you listened to this podcast, that you get another episode of
You get
this
another podcast.
Yeah. Wow.
Congratulations.
Really.
And we hope you enjoy.
But do tell us if you like this podcast at all.
Right, yeah.
Or if you liked the bonus episode.
Yeah, in at the end. Bonus episodes and normal episodes.
Yeah, but truly, we would love to hear people's feedback.
Yeah.
Especially if we do go back and like do season 1 and season 2 recap, we could like touch on different things at that time too. So let us know what you think.
Yeah, so here we are, season 4. And actually, having just come back from Christmas, one thing to take note of that we were just talking about as we came over here is, when is this? Because actually,
when is this taking
the passage
place?
of time is really interesting because we know that we were around Christmas at the end of last season.
Yeah.
And then we know that it's past 9/11. Mm-hmm. So we know that things are kind of like taking place in September.
Well, it's definitely fall. Like there are lots of indications like the ducks are not coming.
Yeah.
People are like, you should wait till next season, right?
Yeah.
AJ said there's only been 5 days of school.
Yeah, he just went back to school, and we have an episode coming up in a couple episodes that's centered around Columbus Day.
Yeah, so I have to imagine it's the fall. Could it be the end of September? I don't know. Like, it feels like there's been more time that's passed between September 11th and now, just like based on the way that the characters talk about it.
Right. Like, could it be 2002 September?
I think it
could it have been a lot of time since the end of season 3?
Like, were they filming a show that was taking place in the future? Because this season came out in 2002.
Right. But when?
Oh, we'd have to look that up. I don't know. Okay, we're back.
Yeah.
We don't usually pause the show.
but it's a new season. We can do whatever we want.
We're just trying shit out. No, but it aired on September 15th, 2002.
Right. Which means that they were filming, obviously, before then. And if this was supposed to be happening at the time that it was being aired, then we're in 2002.
You know what? I kind of like that. Like, they were constructing a show, like, almost like predicting what the world would be like a year after 9/11. Interesting. Because they would have to have been filming it in late 2001, early 2002.
Yeah.
Right? So, like, they dealt with people's feelings and stuff like that. They dealt with the economy. They were, like, making some predictions.
Yeah.
Because they knew when it was going to come out.
Well, the show is always good at predicting things. I mean, they're talking about anti-terrorism before 9/11 even happened.
No, totally.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's when it aired.
Yeah.
But it still is a little bit confusing. Like, a lot, like, I'm trying to think back to the other seasons now, like, how much time passes between them. Sometimes we don't know. But this seems like a long passage of time between last season and now. Like, where we pick up is really strange in some ways.
Yeah.
What's happened in the meantime? You
know?
Right. Aid and Danielle have become really good friends. Mm-hmm. Chris is using again. We definitely didn't have signs of him using at the end of last season, right?
Yeah. Angie Bonpensiero is selling sausages.
Sausages, yeah. I mean, even like there's this like relationship or like this thing hinted at about Furio and Carmela.
Yeah.
Right? Like something. And again, it's funny when now thinking back on it, because this is a storyline that happens in this season. I'm sorry, it's a spoiler.
Yeah.
But it always seemed kind of abrupt, but I didn't really think back on like that there was this large passage of time. Do you know what I mean? Like that they are indicating like.
And what you're
lots of
referring
shit.
to, I guess, is that Carmela and Furio have kind of an attraction.
Well, you could see it just in this
Yeah.
episode. Like, she's like wondering where he is, and like
She's, like, kind of playing with
more
her hair
dolled
and-
up than
yeah.
usual. Yeah, like
And
so I'm not
asking.
giving anything away,
Right.
but I always thought that kind of came out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
But I kind of like that feeling or that emotion because it's like, oh yeah, like all this stuff happened in the meantime. Like,
I think it's-
deal with it.
Yeah, I think it's cool, and I think it's a testament to the excellent writing on the show. Like right away, episode 1, they really
Yeah.
establish new topics, and they're pretty efficient
Yeah.
with it. Yeah, like Christopher using, Tony's issues with Ralph, and
Right.
Ralph with doing cocaine.
Yeah,
and,
the status of Junior's trial or whatever.
Yeah.
Like
Also,
his
Ralph,
case.
like Angie Bonpensiero being depressed, and Ralph now kind of getting involved with Janice. Actually, like overtly. Like,
Not
right-
Angie Bonpensiero
Oh
being
my
depressed.
God, what
I
did
know,
I
I
say?
messed it up in the last
Rosalie.
episode. Rosalie
Oh
April.
my God, what am I doing?
I don't know.
Okay, Rosalie
She's
being
a hard
depressed.
one.
They look kind of similar.
All of them.
I don't know. Anyway, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
You guys all know what I mean. But anyway, yeah, like Ralph and Janice, like we actually see them getting together.
Right, which
now.
it was kind of hinted at.
Yeah.
Well, she was like on his lap. I mean, it was pretty not.
Yeah, but it's not as
Yeah.
overt as what happens in the jail
Yeah.
bathroom. And above and beyond that, we have Christopher and Ralphie both using drugs, which in the past has led to disaster.
Right.
It hasn't been good for either of them, so it's interesting that right off the bat they're establishing that.
Right. Yeah, that's.
I definitely get a feeling in this season opener that things are not on a good path, or people are not in a good place. Like there's definitely an uneasiness, and everybody seems pretty discontent with the world that they're in.
Well, and there's a lot of reference to it. Like Carmela early in the episode has that great line, like everything comes to an end,
Yeah.
right? So she's like, look at the news, look at the economy,
Yeah.
everything comes to an end. There's references like Tony talks about, like there's only 2 ways that guys in this line of work can go out.
Right. I
like-
like actually what he says. There's only 2 ways, and then
He's like-
and then Melfi's like, "Why don't you get out of it?" And he's like, "It's like a joke." But then he's like, "But there is a 3rd way," and the 3rd way is like, I don't know. I mean, it's kind of harebrained. I think a little
Yeah.
bit. Like, I mean, just in terms of like maybe we have the advantage of seeing what Christopher is up to right now,
Yeah.
and like clearly it's a flawed plan if he's completely trusting Christopher as his blood relative, when we see that now he's using heroin again.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of
Yeah,
seems
we
to be
get
like
these hints. We it's almost like a fortune teller or something. Like
Yeah.
we like, and that's why I kind of like how the idea that I just kind of thought of like them projecting into
Yeah.
the future. Like we see these things that other characters don't see about each other, right?
Yeah.
And so we can kind of predict that Tony thinking that about being with family. We can predict that
Yeah.
might not be the likely outcome.
yeah.
Tony can't predict that. So I don't know. It's just kind of interesting. But yeah, things don't seem like they're going that well.
No.
Money's not good.
No.
Um,
The Twin Towers are gone.
yeah.
Yeah.
From the credits. And then there is this concept of debt, right? And
Yeah.
so again, like it's amazing how it kind of like links in with the economy at the time and stuff like that in the real world. But we see these personal and private debts that are being called in
Yeah.
almost in this episode, right?
Yeah.
And how those, I don't know, like it's really hard to get out of debt. Like once you're in debt, it's very hard to get yourself out because repaying someone is never kind of settles it or something
Right.
like that. Like even if you try to repay it for these characters,
Yeah.
there's always like you still owe something. Everyone
Totally.
owes everyone.
And that is like the business that these
Yeah.
people are in. Like, I mean, they benefit basically off of the debts of others.
Yeah.
And and capitalizing on that, extra payment that's required.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think.
How do you want to go about this episode?
Well, we could kind of start. There's a couple like topics, but why don't we start actually at the very beginning? Because I think that first shot is really interesting and actually kind of ties into what we're talking about being in debt and the kind of business that's happening.
Right. So we
So-
have that scene instead of starting with Tony going down to get the newspaper.
The Star Ledger, which he's always reading at the beginning of seasons.
Yeah, we get the New York Times
Mm-hmm.
instead.
And a really interesting shot too of like the New York Times like so clearly in focus.
Yeah.
In the shot, and
And
then
just
Carmela.
half of Carmela's face.
Yeah, and then just like a lot of focus on the words that are from that article.
Right.
Like just talking about it, and the Italian High Court discussing influence peddling and how it's not a crime. So obviously something that's very relevant to these characters,
Right, yeah.
and something that's kind of like showing up in this episode.
Yeah.
Like kind of like the back channeling that's going on, like between
Yeah.
like Zellman and Tony and other characters.
Yeah.
The kind of things that are happening, and also like the fact that Carmela, amongst others, has like built a life based on that kind of influence peddling, and actually has to kind of like has been struggling with coming to grips with that, like how she stands in that and what it means. And now she's worried about like the actual like strictly financial implications, like just the money.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's interesting in terms of that, like, what were they, Recommendiones or whatever.
We're very good at Italian.
That was, that was my best attempt. But
sorry, Margarita. You did a good job trying to teach me Italian when I was a kid. But...
I didn't have a godmother. But yeah, like, you know, that's clearly, like, she's kind of like proud of this news story about Italy. Like, she's like, AJ, you could use this for your project. Like, she's like, I don't know, when I heard that story, I was like, that's pretty crazy that's not illegal, right? Like, like I was like, that's not good.
Yeah.
That
and it's kind of being discussed as like what everybody agreed is totally cool.
Yeah, and she's like kind of proud of this fact. So like we can kind of see the shift in her character maybe for this season. I don't know. I guess we'll see. But But then we see Tony getting the Star Ledger, and it's, you know, and we find out. At first I was like, why is there this giant pile of New York Times newspapers? And again, like, that's also one of the confusing timeline things. Like, how has AJ saved up that many newspapers? Because he was not bringing them home.
That's a great question. Yeah,
I don't know, but I'm like, why is this big pile here? And then you find out that he has this backlog of papers he hasn't been reading. I can never see AJ reading a New York Times. But then Tony does come in with the Star Ledger and shows AJ the car pages or whatever. And he's
and that
pretty
gets
into
his attention,
So.
One thing that I thought was interesting in terms of that kind of like influence peddling is actually, so Tony talking about his plan to bring in blood and work through blood in the famiglia.
Right.
The parallel there between what Carmela brings up of wanting to bring in her cousin, Brian Camerata, to work on their financial details. Yeah. And like kind of like bringing in the family, like that she has a parallel to what Tony is trying to do. And actually Brian Camerata does kind of become a character, not a super important one, but he does like show up, and like there is like, sorry for the spoilers, that Brian Camerata does help them with some financial planning.
So many spoilers today.
I know. That's a big one. Anyway. Hopefully you can still enjoy the show if you didn't know that. Yeah.
But yeah, kind of like, I don't know, maybe like kind of back to the things aren't good times thing too. Like, we know that the news around this, like there would have been, like news is very scary. News is still scary now. Yeah. But like there is this kind of sense of fear, and you have a choice. You can pay attention to the scary stuff and read the real stuff, or you can kind of like look at the car section and be cool. And it's interesting to think about characters in this show that kind of like adopt each technique of coping, kind of. Like we see Bobby, for example, who like talks about, you know, having family members who, you know, went really downhill after, like, you know.
His mom going downhill after September 11th.
Exactly. His mom. I mean, he also talks about the end of the world, and like
he's clearly Bobby having a pretty loose grasp on history with his comments about Nostradamus, then the halfbacks of Notre Dame.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty good. That's a little bit how my brain works, but yeah. So like he seems like a character who is paying attention to these things and not just trying to avoid them.
It's interesting too with Bobby, like as a character, like he's a character who something very good happens to in this episode. Like he's promoted, and yet all we hear from him when he talks about it is like, frankly, I would have thought it would have happened sooner.
Right.
So like it really does add to, like, I just feel like nobody's content right now.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like going back to those, like the debts, you know? Yeah. It is like you think you're doing someone a solid and paying them back fully what you owe them, and no one's ever satisfied with that. I don't know.
Totally. There was something for me too in the scene between Tony and Zellman.
Yeah.
Where Zellman kind of brings up like who can quibble with patriotic entrepreneurship, and he's wearing this US pin, just kind of like as a bit of a timepiece of like where they are. And I just thought it was really interesting because like there's kind of like a manipulation of patriotic entrepreneurship, and the fact that he's wearing this pin. Like, I thought personally, I don't know, sort of like a tongue-in-cheek, or I don't know, it was just kind of like a comment on like using symbols and kind of like manipulating them for your own good, or saying that like Tony would have a reason to like buy up these places with this insider knowledge to use it, and that would be like a patriotic move as an entrepreneur. Because I feel like in this episode there's so many examples of Tony manipulating information to get what he wants, but to make it look like a beneficial move.
Yes.
So there's some episodes where Tony actually...
I think Zalman's probably doing that also.
Of course, yeah.
know, right?
And
Yeah.
I think it's also commentary on, during that time in America, like people using patriotism as like cover
Yeah.
for getting your
All
own
sorts of
agenda
things.
across.
Sure.
Yeah, and I don't know, like seeing the the pin was like kind of like ubiquitous at that time. Like everybody kind of had them in politics, but I think there is also like a reason for that, and there's like some
Yeah.
commentary,
That's good.
especially when it's paired with like that comment about patriotic entrepreneurship.
Right. We know that this like doesn't make Tony feel good though.
Yeah.
Like we have him say twice like about being depressed and ashamed. We have him say like identify himself as depressed. That could be for a number of things. Like it is, like he kind of says it at the end, like, it was only once Carmela started bringing up, like, if I died, that, like, kind of made him go down this hole. But we can tell he's also grappling with some larger issues, too, like with, like, being excited that maybe the ducks are back.
Right. But it's not. It's a squirrel.
I know. I was excited at first, too.
Yeah.
But we can see that, like, he's not functioning all that well in this kind of environment where he's being asked to do these kind of, I don't want to call them legit, but like he's being asked to do these things that kind of like are outside of his normal wheelhouse. Like it would be, he could have a shell company, I guess, like, and own those properties. Yeah. But he could never properly own them on paper. Right. Just like he could never have like these trust funds or whatever like Carmela wants him to have. Right. So yeah, like, and he's like making up these stories to ostensibly get more money for Junior, but really get more money for himself.
Yeah, and I think that there's a lot of examples, like even like so that like these houses on Freelinghausen Avenue or wherever it is, but he
so casual on Freelinghausen Avenue or whatever.
Well, I wrote it down, but I wrote it as, I think I said Freeland House first, and then I kind of figured it out. But sense. Anyway, like the fact that he has insider knowledge and that would actually benefit Junior financially, and then he's manipulating it for his own ends and then making it sound like a favor. Yeah. Also, like when he goes to the meeting, he said before, when he goes to the meeting with all the captains, and he says like, I'm the only one kicking up to Junior. Like it's a shame how much you're sending to the top. Whereas earlier he refused to give Junior a higher cut. Yep. Even with the ducks, like where you see the ducks and like he's excited to see them and it ends up being a squirrel. He's even like manipulating like that true thing that he's like passionate about by like buying duck food and then hiding money in it. And even like when he talks to Carmela, like he tells Carmela, like he's just lying, like he's just like not in fine form right now. He says there's no money in the house, which I guess is accurate. He's like, check, like there's no money in the house since the last raid. And then you see him sneaking out and he goes out in back in his car and in his shed, and then there's like a pool house. And he like moves some tiles and then the money's there, so it's like I don't
know why he's so worried about that.
About what? Well, Carmela finding the money?
Yeah.
I guess, I mean, part of it is like her being an accomplice. Also, I think he doesn't want her to know. Like, I think he's like protecting himself.
I think so, but we don't really see him doing that. Like, he decreased her allowance. Like, we get that, like, money is tighter than it has been or whatever.
Well, he talks about it, but then when you see things, like, you kind of question if maybe he's still doing okay. Yeah, he's just, like, protecting it all for himself. Yeah. So, interesting. Yeah, so that's an interesting thing. Yeah. Also, the big question in this, in terms of, like, doing something that's supposed to be generous but is questionable, is telling Christopher about the Barry Haidu and that he killed Dickie Moltisanti. So he's talking to Chris and he's talking about like your dad was a legend and all these stories, and then this was him, and like so many things in the show, we're left with a sense of ambiguity. Like we really don't know
if he killed Chris's dad or not,
and we never will. Like it's just like there's no, I mean, until maybe the prequel movie comes out that they're working on right now.
I hope they go there. No, I know, it's so interesting. Like, every time I watch that part, I'm always like, okay, well, like, what's Tony's motivation again? Like, because part of me is like, oh, is this kind of like an initiation thing? Like, he wants to see if Chris is really loyal to him. Right. Or I'm like, oh, is this like, does Tony want this guy killed?
Probably.
Right? Like, and he's using Chris. Does Tony see Chris being kind of in a slump and be like, this is something that's going to make him feel better?
Right.
Or does Tony really consider that to be like a gift of like being able to kill the guy who killed your dad? I don't know. It's very ambiguous.
Very ambiguous. And I think it's left that way.
Yeah. You know, like, and like, it's kind of hinted at that like this is something that's been done before. Like, he talks about his uncle, like, anyways.
Yeah, and I mean, even like the way it's set up, like the cop is saying, you know, like, I don't know that guy, you know, and like it's a setup. But then like the last thing he says before he runs off is, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I know. It's such a great, it's a really
So there's kind of mixed messages, and we don't know. We don't have all the information. Yeah. But like Christopher said, maybe it's kind of, it doesn't matter because somebody wants him dead.
I know. But then it's cut with that really interesting scene. Like, after Tony tells Chris the information, we kind of cut back and forth between to Tony and Bobby at a diner.
Right.
And Tony's ordered this like really healthy food
dish.
That's
an interesting thing. Like, he's ordering, healthy like eggs and tomato.
No oil.
And he's wearing like thin clothes that he never wears at any point in this show.
Yeah.
That are like, you see him and he actually looks like...
He weighs himself in the doctor's office, which he usually does.
But he looks skinny and he's wearing like tight-fitting clothing.
Yeah.
So he's clearly like monitoring his weight and trying to be healthy.
Yeah.
Up until the point where he just orders a rare steak with Bobby. And then he just has 2 meals, which I approve of and think is cool, but is not very healthy. Yeah. Bang, bang. Egg, steak.
Egg, steak. Yeah. But I don't know. So like, to see like where Tony, like after giving that information, like waiting for Chris to do this thing, that's where Tony goes with Bobby. I don't know. There's something interesting about it. I haven't quite worked it out yet, but I feel like there's something meaningful in there. I'm just not.
Well, there's also something too with like Bobby and Tony and their stature, because there's like a reversal in their stature throughout the entire series. Like, when it starts, Bobby is like comically overweight.
Yeah.
They give him a fat suit, you know, and Steve Sherwood had to wear a fat suit. By the end, he doesn't. Like, they just say it's fine. And Tony has gained so much weight from where he is in the beginning. Like, there's actually a reversal in kind of like their weight, and maybe even like that reflecting the power dynamic a little bit, because like weight and stature is so related to kind of like
we also
machismo.
We also see him earlier though, like eating a huge ice cream sundae, right? Like before he sits down to watch TV,
which is a link to Down Neck, the episode where he's eating like the exact same ice cream.
Mentioned that a lot of times to me today.
I know. Well, there's just so many like links in this episode. There's so many things that they're doing.
I know.
You
like that. You like that one though. Yes, it's linked to Down Neck, the episode where Tony also does that.
Yeah.
So I don't know. And then when he goes to Melfi at the end, like I said, like he says he's depressed. We really do, to kind of come back, I guess, to where we started this. Like, we get a sense that things are really not going well.
Yeah.
There's no positive trajectory that I can see right now.
Right.
You know? It's hard to believe that one could exist.
Yeah.
For any of the characters, really.
Yeah.
We have inside information that Danielle is a FBI agent, right?
Yeah.
And we get her husband, Will Arnett, we get these 2 scenes with them and their baby.
Right. I wrote Vito ! When he showed up, I wrote Will Arnett !
And it kind of cuts back between...
Strange casting.
Yeah, but great. I'm so happy that that's the casting. It makes it...
It makes sense, I guess.
It's great. We have inside information that she's not who she says she is.
Yeah.
And I love the shots, too, when she shows up. Those are some great scenes in this episode as well, when she and Age show up at the Soprano house.
Yeah, there's a lot going on there.
It's like, and then it cuts back and forth between like Janice and Ralphie upstairs and stuff like that, and there's that scene going on downstairs. Anyways, but
and the
we
POV shots too, like Tony looking over at the 2 empty chairs.
Yeah. No, there's great stuff going on those.
There's things there too with like Tony like eyeing Danielle, like again like a POV shot, but like kind of like looking her up.
Yeah.
And like in a kind of like, well, he's like kind of like checking her out sexually.
Yeah.
And then like you see her face.
Like he does with the nurse, who's also an FBI
Yeah,
informant.
exactly. Well, that's really interesting because when he's talking to Junior, Junior says it must have been that piece of tail, and he's like, "Oh, how could I fall for that?"
Right.
And the irony is, we know, well,
Tony
is
also
falling for
falling
it
for
with
it.
Danielle.
Yeah.
Right.
But also, like, he liked flirting with that nurse too.
Yeah.
You
Totally.
know?
Yeah, they're both. Yeah, Tony
Yeah.
isn't really in a position to like
Judge Junior.
judge Junior for that.
Yeah.
I think he says like, how could you fall for that? And
Yeah.
yet we know, because we know who Danielle is, that Tony is also like susceptible to that.
Totally.
To that risk.
Yeah. But again, like, we see how much she sees, in that moment when she comes with aid. We know that it's not good.
No. Well, it depends what your definition of good is, who you're rooting for.
No, I'm always rooting for my characters.
Tony?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Go, Tony.
It's hard not to. I don't know, at least for me, I'm like, oh my gosh, like, I hope you could avoid this one. I don't know.
Well, that's what this show does.
Totally.
I mean, yeah.
Totally.
Whether it's logical or not. I mean, I think
Yeah.
that's like the natural thing to do.
Yeah.
There was, in terms of like the sexuality of it too, there was an interesting edit where Ralph and Janice are like getting involved with each other in the bathroom. Yeah. And then there's a really weird edit. Actually, the edit's not weird, but there's an edit to a shot like right on Danielle's elbow while Rosalie's holding it. And it actually like looks like a breast or something.
Yeah.
It's a strange one. Actually, it's like if you watch it, I mean, if you're looking to like check out some breasts,
some not boobs, like kind of like
some elbows.
Yeah. When people take pictures of their elbow crease, it looks like a butt.
Yeah, but that's kind of like what they do. It's a very like deliberate shot.
Yeah.
And they start there, and it's funny that they edit there from Ralphie and Janice, and then they go there, and just seeing Danielle like using that, leveraging that, and how it is a threat.
Or in the scene earlier with Christopher, right? Like she's wearing this like crop top. She's like being kind of sassy.
Yeah.
Definitely, like, I think she's a great actor.
Yeah.
I don't know the name of the actor who plays Danielle / agent, whoever. I don't know her real name.
Right.
Because she does both parts pretty believably.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
I didn't know that Icelandic flight attendants were just, so easily going to hang out with mob guys on their off time.
They're just
crazy.
down for whatever. Yeah. We did not have that experience when we flew with WOW Air to Reykjavik.
But maybe this was Iceland Air.
Iceland Air, yeah.
They were crazy.
That was a very cheap flight with WOW Air, so.
We got to see Carmine, though.
That's right. And actually, that was something I thought was interesting, like how they start this whole season with a shot of the New York Times.
Yeah.
Like for me, like there's like some kind of like indication that New York will play into this season more.
Yep.
And
already Tony talks about like Tribeca and stuff like that too.
Even like we see like this, Tony is talking to Christopher, like, what did you learn? You just witnessed a sit down between two bosses.
Right.
So bringing in the boss of a New York family for a sit down, that's actually kind of a new thing. Johnny Sack, they're expanding on his relationship with Polly.
Right.
And, we kind of feel like, he's also passed on the information to Carmine that Tony was wearing shorts.
Right.
Which is an interesting thing. That was actually in the first season, they got a call from like an actual New Jersey mob family. And that was like the criticism they said.
Is that right?
Because during the barbecue scene in the first season, Tony is wearing shorts. And they never do that again in the show.
That's funny.
But yeah, they actually like got contact and said like, that is not something that would ever happen.
That's hilarious.
Like somebody in the family would never wear shorts to a barbecue. So if you go back to a very early season 1, you'll see that, but it's actually, they managed to like bring it back and actually work it into the writing.
Wow, that's funny.
We find out that Tony is 42 in
Yeah.
his scene with Melfi.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, there's that last shot on money, like going into
there's that whole last
the $20
scene.
bill. And
I don't know. Like, I think that whole last scene's really interesting with Chris's mom.
It is, yeah.
So, like, we find out, right? Like, we knew Chris was using before, but we find out that, in his family, there's a history of, like, issues with alcohol, at least. I don't know what else his mom is into, but she's, like, trying to be sober. She has all these things up on her fridge. And they kind of like talk around her sobriety in that scene, right?
Yeah.
Like he kind of smells her breath. And, but And then we have kind of this closure on his dad, who's like been brought up a handful of times before this episode, right? Like we know that his dad was, you know, Tony's mentor or whatever. At least that's what Tony says, right? But we start to like build this new backstory that we didn't have access to before for Christopher.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I think it is really interesting. And the scene, I mean, like, there's like a couple shots leading up to that scene where we focus it on the money. She, like, it goes back and forth between him holding the bill.
Yeah.
And then to her with the photo down and drinking her tea or whatever. Yeah. Like, she's, like, put the photo face down. And then we see, like, Chris doesn't notice that, though. He doesn't notice that she's put the photo face down. He's, like, he's thinking about this thing that he's been involved in, like, proud of himself, wants his mom in some ways to like kind of be proud of him, right? Like he kind of like wishes he could tell her is the sense that I get. So he leaves this bill on the fridge. And it's $20, right?
I mean, and
like,
what does that really mean? Like without telling her, she's clearly just going to spend the $20 on something.
But I find that it's so interesting, right? Like, but for him, that's like repayment for a debt in some ways too, right? And so or it's like what his mom is owed.
And because his mom also talks about like, I didn't burden you with a stepfather. You know, like there's this idea of what they owe each other or what they've done for each other.
I think it's a really awesome scene.
It is. Yeah, it's super powerful. And also with the focus on finances throughout the whole episode, like it kind of brings it all together. Like everybody is worried about money.
Yeah.
And yet, like for Christopher, like what does it really mean? Like what did he really need from that? Like what was really, truly important for him?
Yeah.
And it's the money there was actually like a symbol of something else.
Yep. Of this larger thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. What else do you have? I don't really have.
You know, I think it's like it's an amazing episode, and it really like establishes the mood and themes of season 4, and like very quickly they kind of like throw out a lot of ideas that really like world build.
Yeah.
And I think it's amazing. Like there's a lot of topics that are brought up that will like continue to unfold throughout the season, but it's not, for me, it's not like an episode that has like as much like content to dive into as some others, but I mean, I love it. It's amazing.
Yeah. Well, it really, it sets a mood so effectively.
Yeah.
Like you're like, you know, yes, they were projecting it, but like I feel like I'm almost like putting myself back there to like how people felt about that at the time and stuff.
Yeah.
You know, like it really like puts you into that space, which is probably why we start to get so depressed when we watch this show.
Yeah, it only gets worse from here.
Yeah.
You just get more and more depressed.
So
it's very depressing.
Maybe this will help us to try to avoid it, watching it this time through.
Cool.
By talking about our feelings.
Yeah, hopefully.
On a podcast.
Yeah. Oh, my one stray observation. When Angie Bonpensiero does show up again, interestingly, she's in the exact same place where Carmela saw her last time.
Right.
Where she was worried about money.
Right.
And she's next to the same meat aisle that was associated like with meats that we kind of like talked a lot about in season 3. Like meat kind of becoming this like major symbol that's actually discussed outright in the like breakthrough that Tony has in Melfi's office, getting hit in the head by the slab of meat.
Yeah.
You know. She's
selling a Polish meat.
Kielbasa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's something.
Well, yeah, it's just it's interesting like the setting there.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was just something I thought about. That they deliberately chose to put her in the exact same place where Carmela saw her last time. And now she's working.
Yeah.
So.
I like that you just threw that in there.
Just wanted to end on that.
Yeah.
Meats.
Cool.
Love meats.
Meat.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.
And we'll be back with episode 2 of season 4.
Feel free to email us.
Yep.
At inattheendpodcast@gmail.com.
Yeah.
And yeah, let us know what you think. We would love to hear from you guys. And we'll see you for episode 2.
See you for episode 2.
Bye.